Everyone, welcome to Multifamily Investment Advisors Multifamily Monday Market Update. I'm Vince Ewing. I work closely with the acquisitions for the team here. We've got a good presentation for you guys here this morning. Before we get started here, just some information about Keller Williams, the #1 real estate firm in the United States. And elsewhere across 5 continents with 230 plus market center locations. We indeed can get the job done for each and every one of our diverse pool of clients. I wanted to kick it off today by giving an update on the Chicago market and what we're seeing in terms of multifamily. There are a lot of investors very interested in getting into the Chicago market due to the rate of return and the room for growth in comparison to the population. We maintain to be the 3rd most populous metro area in the United States, while maintaining a over 50% clip of renters in the population. Those renters generally are paying less than 20% of their income in rent. That leaves a lot of meat on the bone for growth for would-be investors that want to add value, reposition, or use the momentum properties already have to bolster their portfolio. We currently have seen that Chicago has experienced a stronger recovery than other metro areas in terms of the rental market following the pandemic. The rental increase from January to September in Chicago was 0.5% higher than the average of the normal metro area in the city. 36 Fortune 500 companies hold their headquarters within the Chicago MSE. This is a strong market for would-be employees who are looking for a place to call home for new jobs, with those 36 Fortune 500 companies being here, and those employees are indeed willing to pay a premium on the luxury rentals that we're seeing develop in the downtown area and elsewhere. I do want to pass the ball over to Jason to see if we had an update of any developments going on in the Chicagoland area that he wanted to share.
Yeah, thanks, Vince. I can't do a screen share right now, but I did want to just kind of briefly just go over some updates regarding 43 Green, which is a development led by P3 Markets, Phil Belcom. And this development is on 43rd and Calumet. Just got some news that they received their permit to begin construction on the foundation of the property, which is going to be a little bit under 100, 99 units, with half being market rate and half being affordable. And it's steps away from the 43rd Green Line. So it's going to be a really nice development for us to kind of keep our eye on, as they should have the groundbreaking ceremony for that development coming up pretty soon. Thanks, Vince.
I appreciate that, Jason. We'll be looking forward to those developments and the details associated. I want to pass the ball over to our Director of Investor Relations, Kelly Rich, to shine a light on some of the interesting opportunities that we currently have available at Multifamily Investment Advisors.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, absolutely. Rolling into the last part of the year, we absolutely do have some opportunities available for investors looking into the Chicagoland market. First, I want to talk about, we have an opportunity to pick up 22 units in Calumet Park. Calumet Park is located about 25 minutes south of downtown Chicago, just outside city limits for those who are unfamiliar. The package itself is about 2 blocks from the I-57 Expressway. It's comprised of 2 buildings on the same block within 2 or 3 lots of each other. 16 units in the portfolio are new gut rehabs. They were just renovated this year in 2020. The other 6 were renovated in 2015. So two very well-maintained buildings, an opportunity for you to pick that up at 62 a door. Next up, I want to talk about 5228 South Blackstone. This is a rare opportunity to acquire a trophy wealth preservation asset in the downtown Hyde Park vicinity. It's right in the 53rd Street corridor, which a lot of people are familiar with, close to U of C and the hospital. This 40-unit building, it has strong long-term retail tenants, including a long-term national tenant in Boston market. This is definitely something to reach out to us about as well. And then lastly, I want to talk about an opportunity that we have in the West Chatham neighborhood. 59 units. It's a mixed use opportunity. So you'll have the apartments upstairs and then the commercial down below. And offers an opportunity to pick up 59 units in the West Chatham neighborhood. I will put our contact information in the chat, but to reach out for us for more information on these investment opportunities, you can reach us at www.chicagomultifamilyinvestments.com or by email at investment@kwcommercial.com. And then lastly, by telephone, 312-863-8990. And I'll for sure put these in the chat. Thank you, Vince.
Thank you, Kelly. As you guys can see, we have many opportunities in various areas throughout the Chicagoland region, and we'll continue to be providing those opportunities and information to you, our stakeholders and audience. We appreciate you attending. If you look up and it's 12 noon on any Monday, you'll be able to tune into Multifamily Investment Advisors Multifamily Monday Market Update. I'm now going to close out with some footage from the CAR webinar a couple weeks back on September 11th. Some valuable information regarding the recent property tax assessment will be available in this webinar if you didn't get a chance to log in at that point in time. And we do appreciate your attendance here and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Power lunch here on September 11th, a lovely day in Chicago. I'm sure you're all enjoying, as I am, this flannel shirt weather that we've got going on here. I, for one, am here for all autumnal weather. So thank you for, instead of taking a nice walk by the lake or in the woods, joining us for this particular event. A little bit of housekeeping before we get moving. Today's Power Lunch is about the corporate real estate market. We're going to talk with some experts who will share their perspectives on what we're seeing in Chicago and what agents, property managers, lenders, etc., are looking at with regards to specific challenges in the market and opportunities. So this will be a really wonderful hour, and I want to thank you all for joining us. I'm Jacob Knabb, the Director of Commercial Services at the Chicago Association of Realtors. So I am the staffer that works with our commercial real estate folks and handles events like this. If you're interested in learning more about commercial real estate at the Chicago Association of Realtors, you can tune in to our website, chicagorealtor.com/commercial forum, and find all the information that you might want to find. I want to remind everybody this is a webinar, so you are muted and your video feeds are turned off. That means that we can't really see or hear you in a traditional sense. However, you can see and hear us, and you can also engage with us, and we would like for you to do so. At the bottom of your screen, if you wiggle your mouse or you tap your iPad, you'll see a box down there called Q&A with a couple of little thought bubbles, and that would be a lovely place for you to paste and write your questions, and we will address them as we go along. And also, sorry, I'm stumbling a little bit on my words. I'm so excited about this weather. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, and I want to especially thank our sponsor, Inland Real Estate. Inland Private Capital Corporation is who we are going to shout out today. Inland, as you know, has several different branches, and this is one of their branches. So if you are looking for capital, lending, etc., this is maybe perhaps a great opportunity for you to look at. You might also know that Inland specializes in a 1031 Delaware statutory trust like-kind exchange. And if that is something you'd like to learn more about and a service you'd like to offer to your clients, I would encourage you to reach out to Inland Corporation. Inland is an annual sponsor of Commercial Forum programming, and we are so happy to have them. So let's kind of look at what we're doing today. Today's Power Lunch features a state of the market discussion with corporate
guys.
real estate, followed by a table talk on what leading agents are seeing in recent deals and how turbulent times are impacting commercial real estate in Chicago. You will hear firsthand what top practitioners with the Illinois Retail Management Association, Colliers, Marcus and Millichap, and others are seeing as far as the pulse of the market with commercial real estate, how quarantine and market conditions are impacting that. So let's get moving. I'd like to go ahead and welcome our first set of panelists. Today we have Chris Irwin, Senior Vice President, Retail Sales and Leasing from Colliers International. Chris has a lovely background going on there. I was about to say how nice his kitchen looks, and then I realized I was duped. Sharon Rizzo, broker from CB Exchange. Sharon does actually have what looks like a very lovely room in her home as her background. And Tanya Trish Daywood, Vice President and General Counsel of the Illinois Retail Merchants Association, or IRMA. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jacob.
So I want to go ahead and jump right into this. I feel like I've got a lot to talk about. The way I'd like to open, and maybe we can do a round robin where all of you respond, quite frankly, is I'd love to hear about the decisions corporate clients are making in our current market here in Chicago. You know, we've known over the last few months that some of the bigger institutional players and larger corporations have kind of been hitting the pause button a little bit while they wait to see what's happening. There were a lot of news stories about issues that Walgreens was facing, for example, with civil unrest. And we know that with the market as it is, lending has been a little bit slower to move and such. So I'm kind of curious to know, what are you all seeing? You know, is the market falling out some? Did it ever freeze to begin with? And I think maybe we could start with Chris, if that's okay. Chris, what are your thoughts on this?
We were dealing, I just want to discuss a specific property and a specific company, Walmart. So there's been a lot of conversations with what's Walmart going to do. You know, what they've had a difficult time entering the Chicago market as it was. And so that being said, they see Chicago as a good market for them to be in. They're here to stay. But, you know, like most of these larger companies, they are slow to open back up and see what's going on, especially mostly with the pandemic that's going on. And what I'm seeing with new people entering the market, I've got some clients from Atlanta that would like to enter the market and open 10 locations. And besides the fact that the state of Illinois can't get them the paperwork that they need as a franchise or franchisee model, they're really looking at spring 2021, March, April, May. But that being said, we're looking at properties right now, and landlords are very understanding on, if we sign a deal now, they wouldn't be paying rent until summer 2021, and they're happy to be doing that. So that's kind of where they're at this point.
So it sounds like from your perspective, the market has been a tad bit frosty though, and maybe slower to warm up in some regards, in that maybe deal flow is taking a bit longer to happen, or you're seeing a little bit more of a buffer between kind of closing something and when, you know, rents start to come in.
Yeah, we're seeing a rent reduction in most markets of 20% at least, maybe even up to 50%. But landlords in general have most that are in a good position financially are willing to wait also and not sign a 5-year deal at a 20 to 50% decrease in rent. We've also seen tenant improvement allowances get a little bit more aggressive because cash is king right now. So that being said, right now, most of the deals that I have going on, which are about 30% of what I would normally be doing, are some sort of medical, personal fitness.
Well, that's interesting, you know, and I think personal fitness in particular is interesting because we see, you know, a trend over the last decade that's been a shift more toward services that are kind of in person, with retail particularly, right? The idea that something, rather than selling you a running shoe, we're going to sell you a running club, and oh, by the way, you can buy some shoes. And with the pandemic, I think that's obviously been curtailed a bit. So it is interesting to hear that you're seeing kind of personal fitness still performing, because you would think that might actually be something that would be hit by, coronavirus.
I think honestly, people aren't buying a new dress or a new shirt. They're just making sure their mental and physical health is still in check. So.
Yeah, that stands up. Sharon, I'd love to pivot to you and hear a little bit about what you're seeing.
Well, I think, Jacob, what I'm saying is that with institutional funds, for example, I think that I deal a lot with investors. And on the institutional side, I'm finding that because of government regulations and other things that institutional funds have to be concerned about, they are definitely hitting the pause button for sure. On the other hand, with family investors that we're working with right now, I do a lot of work in the deconversion market, which is a whole other thing that maybe I'll talk a little bit about later. But with family funds, of course, they have much more flexibility. So unfortunately, with the institutional funds, by the time that they see a real clear vista, which a lot of institutional funds want to see before they move forward, a lot of the really good opportunities are going to be gone, which will not be the case with family funds that we're dealing with right now, because they have much more flexibility. So that's certainly what I'm seeing. I do a lot of residential as well. And of course, that market is very different now in Chicago. Actually, prices have held pretty well because there hasn't been a huge influx of listings yet because of COVID. I think a lot of sellers are pulling back. So we're not quite sure what that's going to be like in the spring, for example, when maybe COVID is more under control. You might see a big influx, in which case that could affect pricing. But what we are seeing is that the suburban market, particularly on the North Shore, I live in Lake Forest, and it's really interesting that in June, we saw literally the curve on sales, which had been very flat the last 2 years, literally went up 80%. In June. It was almost a right angle because of people moving to the suburbs, and most of those were coming from Chicago. So that's sort of an interesting development that we've seen in the burbs, but that is in more of the residential market.
Well, one of those rules of thumb that you learn pretty quickly is the idea that rooftops lead to retail, and that when we see a lot of movement on the housing market, oftentimes commercial follows along with that, because we see where the bodies go, and that's where the shops go and the offices, etc. So it's an interesting trend to see people kind of moving out of the closer suburbs and city locations into more suburban and exurban locations, and especially with this walkability movement we've seen over the last decade, and the idea that you want to live, work, and play in the same place. Now maybe less so, because it might be more expensive to live, work, and play in the West Loop when you could probably be out in Gurnee or something and do the same thing, right? Particularly when you're working at your desk or your table. So, that idea of live, work, and play is all happening in your house. And that might also be partly why you are seeing a lot of movements, in the residential market. But it does sound like with those larger institutional, those REITs funds and such, that we are seeing, again, that frozen thing going on. And that's going to be a little bit whiplash inducing, right? Because those REITs have kind of been seen as maybe the stablest type of investment when it comes to commercial real estate, or at least one that can have high yields.
Yeah, and I think that probably that's how they think they're going to remain stable, at least for a while, perhaps, is to hit that pause button until they see how that landscape is really going to play out as COVID, as we get over it. And I think the prediction is that we will probably be in pretty good shape in early 2021 as far as that is concerned. Hopefully we will be, at that point. And then you're going to see the institutional funds, I think, be much more loose than they've been recently.
Well, that'll be an interesting thing, and we'll definitely return to that idea in a moment, Sharon, because I'm wanting you all to break out your crystal balls and tell us what you're seeing. But right now I want to pivot over to Tanya for a moment, because you come from this from a little bit of a different perspective than Chris and Sharon, in that you are kind of more of a lobbyist and a policy wonk, right? And so you're really deep in the weeds on what actually the rules and conditions of the market are. And we've already heard from both Chris and Sharon that market conditions are influencing things. And we've heard specifically from Sharon that some of the reasons those larger institutional funds are hitting pause is because of what they're looking at with policy. So I'd love to hear from you a little bit about what you're on the front lines of at the moment when we look at some of these larger clients and what's happening in Chicago.
Yeah, so it's a little all over the place, right? So I come from a retail restaurant slash fitness understanding because IRMA represents retail restaurants and the Illinois Fitness Alliance, which is health clubs. So we're a little bit all over the place. But what I would say is, look, we all know that there was a lot of flux in retail prior to COVID, right? And retailers were trying to figure out how to make this work, depending on where in the spectrum you are. Department stores were having a really rough go of it. They still are. On top of that, they were closed. They weren't considered essential. All of that has had a lot of impact to, you know, what they see their future is. A lot of this is about figuring out what people want, how to be more of a one-stop shop like a Walmart that was essential and open, and how to be the preferred choice for customers, even in a digital age where a lot more customers are now starting to shop online, and COVID has pushed that a lot farther along than I think a lot of retailers were thinking would happen. So retail has been playing a little bit catch up, trying to figure out how to not only get you to come in the store, but continue to buy online as well, having their omni-channel presence matter in that sense, and having the presence seamless, whether or not you're actually in the store or shopping online. So I would say that those stores that were in financial distress prior to COVID, not a whole lot has changed. What you are seeing is probably an increase in store closings. Maybe they would have closed them a little bit more over time, but COVID has helped to quicken that pace. And for those stores that were in a better economic position, it depends. So for example, if you're in the grocery space and you were open and people frankly were just shopping at the grocery store more, while you had a lot of expenses that people don't realize through COVID, you still were able to make some profit. And so I think they're starting to see themselves differently in how they interact with the customer. Frankly, parts of grocery were growing. They still are. They're still on pace. If they already had planned to open source, they're still continuing to do that. So that's a positive part of the market. Even in the independent space, we're still seeing, I certainly am hearing a lot of hope from them, that they'll continue to make their way even in the face of, you know, sort of larger national competitors. So that growth, that space is good. But yeah, I think in the pharmacy space, you know, they had severe Medicaid challenges funding. A lot of them were closing locations. That will continue to happen. So you'll see some constricting in some spaces and then continued openings, maybe a little slower, but continued nonetheless. So like I said, it's a little bit all over the place. But a lot of that has to do with whether or not they stay open or closed, with what they think is going to happen politically in the market, what they think government is going to do to either help or hurt. And that is a signal to them on where the growth, if they're growing, should be. And so that is playing a lot into a lot of the decisions. You got the uncertainty of COVID. In the city of Chicago, you certainly had the uncertainty presented by the looting that happened over the last few months and what the lasting impact of that has been. And just a general nervousness about whether or not Chicago has crime under control and how that might impact what decisions people make going forward on the commercial side. And so I think that the city of Chicago has made great strides to try and convince the employer community, the commercial community, that they do have this under control, and here's how we do it. And we have to have some hope that they are having our best interest at heart. So we'll see how that plays out going forward. But a lot, I think, is relying, especially in Chicago's commercial corridors, on how Chicago continues to happen, continues to make people feel like it really is a safe international city and people should be here.
Well, it's very interesting to hear a lot of what you're saying. And, you know, you've seen firsthand with retail, some of the big changes that even like stalwarts, you know, long-time retail companies have had to make in order just to survive. And you add things like civil unrest and quarantine to those challenges, and you can see why certain companies are just holding up shop and closing locations, and you see a real contraction there happening. But it is interesting to see too how quickly folks are adapting. You know, we're seeing like 3-4 years worth of adaptation happening within the span of weeks and months because it just has to be that way. I mean, I like to joke that the Target on Elston where I go is kind of like the Gucci Target, right? Because that's the one you can go to and they have whatever, this and that and the other. And like probably I'd say 10 to 15% of their parking lot now is for people who pull up and want someone to load groceries for them. And Target
Absolutely.
has recently launched like an Amazon competitor, right? So you can pay $99 a year and get your delivery from Target. And it's happened so fast, you know. And
it's happened so fast. COVID has really quickened the pace about how physical retail, brick and mortar retail needs to address the changing consumer. And we knew that before COVID, but COVID has just really made it more intense. And frankly, independent grocers who were not even in that game are now in that game. And they've had to do it over the span of just a few months. Even federal benefits like food stamps and that, now they're obviously online, but now you can order those online now through and pay with your SNAP card. So it's, the world has changed in how we service the customer, and continuing to make the brick and mortar space relevant really is key. Retail can't be fully online. You got to figure out how to make both of the presences work. And that's what we're doing right now.
Yeah, and it's no mean feat, right? I mean, you have to really, it's a lot of work to get to that place. I want to sort of shift a little bit, and we've heard some discussion of this already, but when you think about some larger players and institutional players hitting the pause button, you know that, you know, as we heard Sharon say, for individual buyers, they're still moving, but there also are those mid-sized folks that maybe might be seeing some opportunity. And I'm kind of curious to hear what you all are seeing in that way. If you've got some of those really massive funds not really doing much and there still is opportunity, are you seeing some surprising folks pop up and move? Or are you seeing interesting new ideas of how space can be used? And maybe we can shift back to Sharon, since she was already sort of talking about this a little bit earlier. Sharon, are you seeing any kind of surprising players in the field right now? I think you're still muted, Sharon. I can't hear you.
Oh, there we go. Okay, sorry about that, Jacob.
Totally okay.
On the mid-size, I'd like to piggyback a little bit on what Tanya was saying. I think it's fascinating how fast so many of these commercial players or the brick and mortar have adapted. For example, when you go into it like a DSW and all of a sudden the physical structure inside has almost changed. You have the east and west lines and the arrows and actually they have changed the whole story and done that in a very short period of time, and they're only one. And when you go into all of these stores, how fast they have adapted. So Tanya, you're absolutely right. That's a change that has happened so quickly. It's also interesting if you talk about some of it. I'm switching a little, Jacob. I know you were talking about mid-size, and I don't think I have a lot of experience with that, but with some of your really large players like Microsoft or Amazon, how they have taken some really crippled commercial space, like big warehouses out in the middle of nowhere, and sort of fit them again to meet their service needs. And they're buying up a lot. But of course, that would be a larger player. So I don't know if someone can speak more to the mid-size or smaller players a little bit better than I can, perhaps.
Chris, do you have any thoughts here? We can certainly keep it on the larger players too. I'm just curious to hear what you're seeing, especially.
Well, the most activity I have right now are high net wealth individuals that may have bought triple net lease properties that have gone vacant and they are just kind of cleaning up their inventory, taking the loss. And I'm seeing a lot of users, owner users, look at them at maybe land value, real estate value, as opposed to the lease value that they were purchased. And I'm seeing, I probably got 5 or 6 different contracts for users that are buying properties at 50 cents on the dollar of what the last person purchased it at. So, it's a little indicative of what happened in 2008, where things were just, there was movement. It wasn't really positive movement, but there was movement. So I haven't really seen the banks get involved yet. But I think in some of the areas where you're seeing, somebody that may have actually purchased something that never was of that value, they're just getting rid of it. So, that's been something that I'm probably going to see a lot more of, especially in some of these retail corridors that are a little oversaturated.
Well, one of the pieces of advice, and I'll pivot right over to Tanya just in a second, but one of the pieces of advice that often comes up when the market contracts or we see recession is that idea that Warren Buffett always loves to say, that this is your best opportunity, right? Like, this is when you should be investing, not when it's hot and everybody's in the game. So it's interesting to kind of hear from you, Chris, that you're seeing a bit of that. People are sort of consolidating and trying to sort of make some moves at a moment when there could be opportunity to get that done.
We have a property under contract right now, and they said that they were getting an SBA loan for 2.25%. It's unbelievable. So,
yeah.
That's the opportunity that people are taking.
Tanya, I could see you had a comment ready to roll. So I'm going to come to you right now.
Yeah, I was just you were kind of thinking about reimagining space, right? Like what are folks doing? And I think you can see that a lot. You saw a lot of it pre-COVID, and you've seen some more interesting things happen since COVID. So for example, when you saw in the grocery space, a lot of space being taken and used really as restaurant space, right? Because they're trying to figure out what are the high margin items here, and how can I keep people in the store a little bit longer? So you've seen a lot, not only in the actual service space, grilling, serving wine, that kind of thing in the grocery space, but also further investment in the hot and cold bars. They're huge moneymakers. And if you're a grocery store without one, you're not going to be in business long, right? So that has been big for grocery, and frankly, a proven competitor to regular restaurants, frankly. And so that's where you've seen a different imagining of space in a grocery store to make it more profitable. Is maybe I shouldn't assume that you know this, but the profit margin for a grocery store is somewhere in between 1% and 2%. It is really the lowest of any retail, certainly lower than restaurants. So they have to figure out how to stay relevant. So you've got that going on, but also I think it's interesting what you've seen with Kohl's in the partnership with Amazon, reimagining their space first, allowing folks to bring back returns and use it as that kind of center for Amazon, but now taking part of their store and using it for that. So that's a great example of a retailer that has had some struggles in trying to figure out where they fit pre-COVID, right? Where they fit into this new economy, and trying to get creative. A lot of folks see Amazon as their big competitor, and they are, right? And sometimes if you can't beat them, maybe you join them. And so I think they are doing something interesting. We'll see if it's profitable, right? But it's certainly interesting in reimagining space and partnership. And I think we'll see more of that kind of development as we move forward. People are frankly just looking for less space. And so they may be growing, but they're growing smaller in space. If you look at the target, the city, some of the city targets, they're really home goods stores, pretty much, or pharmacy kind of thing. And that's again reimagining, keeping the brand, but reimagining the space for the urban customer. You'll see a lot more of that.
Oh, it's anecdotal, but I've literally seen some of that. I went to return some things at the Kohl's on Elston last weekend, and I'm wearing a flannel I bought while I was there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because I didn't intend to buy anything at all, but to get to the Amazon, you walk through the middle of the store and to the left, and there's the drop-off center, and it happened to be by Men's, and I saw they had great deals, and I ended up buying something, you know.
I'm sure that was coincidence.
Yeah, totally coincidental, not by design at all. And yeah, and then it's the same too, like the Logan Square Target that's been eagerly anticipated for some time and a bit controversial too, of course, but there now are billboards saying that it's open, and it is as you described. It's a smaller footprint Target. It's not like the give everything to everyone, 2 floors kind of deal that you might see, you know, on Irving Park, for example. And so it is interesting to see those things happening. And I'm curious to hear a little bit more about reinventions of space, because you mentioned how grocery is kind of mirroring what restaurants do. But one thing I've seen a bit of is restaurants trying to sell like groceries. So, you know, if you love Italian plates, but you don't really want to eat there, now they'll sell you food and also high-end olive oil and cheese, right, that you can get from them. Is that something we might see more of?
I think, you know, that's certainly more of a COVID phenomenon. Certainly there have been restaurants, especially, you know, some Italian delis that have done the grocery restaurant all in one for a long time. But I think that we will see how they sort of fit in that space. I don't think that you'll see them sort of replacing someone's weekly trip to the grocery store. But I think it's a great creative way to figure out how to improve those margins when business overall is down. You know, does it drive traffic to the restaurant? Maybe. But certainly if they're in the restaurant and they see the grocery goods, there might be a desire to pick some of it up. So we're not sure that it necessarily is a profitable venture right now, but it's certainly, you know, innovation built out of necessity. And again, that's
it's like
not
a
a bad
triage
thing.
moment, right? I mean, you've
Yeah,
got
absolutely.
places that are literally bleeding out, so they're going to try anything.
Absolutely.
I would love to sort of, before we open it up and welcome Tony Hardy and Sarah Ware onto the call, I would like to hear a little bit of speculation from you all. You know, as I mentioned earlier, I'd love for you to break out your crystal balls and talk a little bit, and some of you have already. But you know, what are some things you think you'll see on the horizon? Where might we be in 6 months with this conversation? If we were to have this panel in 6 months, what do you think some of the things you would be saying at that point might be? And Chris, you haven't spoken for a while, so let's come back to you.
You know, I think that pre-COVID, you know, a lot of the retailers that you're seeing filing bankruptcy now and having real problems, the writing was already on the wall. So I think tired brands are, you know, mostly going to be going away. And I think you're seeing a lot of new brands entering the market and seeing new opportunities. Sweet Green, for example, is somebody that's coming to the market and doing some things and you know, offering, you know, very, you know, high quality, very healthy foods. And so I think you're just going to see a shift. I think, as Tanya mentioned, the being able to pick up stuff and drop off stuff and deliver stuff, I think all of these retailers are going to take somewhat of a shift on that. But ultimately, I don't think that you're going to see storefronts go away. I think that there are some markets that were oversaturated as it was. And, you know, I just think there's going to be a lot more activity. I think as soon as someone gets a handle on how we can attack the virus and a vaccine, I think there's going to be a mad rush of money flowing around, especially if these interest rates stay low. Whoever is the president moving forward, hopefully that, you know, those things will continue to happen. You know, Chicago's still a great city. It's still a beautiful city in the middle of the country. I don't want to live in California right now. They're having such a tough time. You know, I love living here, and I think ultimately you're going to see a resurgence.
Sharon, let's pivot to you. What do you expect to be talking about in 6 months? What's in your crystal ball?
Well, I agree with Chris. I think that Chicago is basically a great city, and I think we are going to see a resurgence. And this might apply a little bit more to the residential market. What I am concerned about, though, there are so many restrictions right now on on evictions, which of course are going to affect landlords. And I'm a little bit concerned about the amount of foreclosures that might be in the crystal ball, let's say in the spring. However, that would create an opportunity, just like it did before when we had the Great Recession in 2008, for a lot of investors to pick up some really, really good deals, if that were the case.
Well, it's interesting. Tanya, let's come over to you. What do you expect as a staffer and someone working for an association in 6 months, what do you think your members are going to be talking about? What are you going to be dealing with at that?
Yeah, I think right now, folks are shedding underperforming locations. That was happening pre-COVID. That's going to continue to happen. I think hopefully 6 months from now, they'll find themselves in a more stable economic situation so that they can look to the future. I think, and they're going to double down on the locations that they have, right? They're going to make them stronger. They're going to continue to renovate and make them brighter open spaces. I think you'll see that. The other thing I think I'd say is that Michigan Avenue is not dead. State Street is not dead. And those will come back. I don't know, I think some conversation needs to happen on what rent should look like in those areas. But at the end of the day, we're going to be back doing conventions. We're going to have tourism again. COVID's not going, even if it is here forever, there will be a vaccine at some point, and we'll get to some semblance of normalcy, which means that those retail corridors that were strong before will be strong again. And so I have a lot of hope there. Not only there, but for the neighborhood corridors as well. What I've seen, especially with some of the small businesses, is that they know fairly quickly whether or not they're going to rebuild, right? Whether or not they're going to try and stick it out, and then they act. So, or they close up right away. It's kind of an either or. So I think we'll see a little bit more stability in the market, and those that have stayed will double down and try and make those places successful.
These are great thoughts and exciting. Maybe we can come back in 6 months and talk about how accurate we were. At this point, I want to go ahead and open up the discussion. I'd like to welcome Tony Hardy from Marcus and Millichap. Tony is chair of the Commercial Forum Leadership Committee, and apparently he is also in a ski lodge at the moment. And I'd like to also welcome Sarah Ware from Ware Realty. Sarah is the vice chair of Commercial Forum, and also now I think it's safe to say our incoming treasurer for the Chicago Association of Realtors. And congratulations, Sarah. We did have a question bubble up during the opening moments that I think Tony would like to kind of tackle, and that is the idea of the state of multifamily. We've focused a bit on, by design, of course, on retail here, but we also can see some similar things happening over with that twin multifamily. And so, Tony, do you want to kind of dig in on that question? What are some things you're seeing, and what's the state of multifamily right now?
Yeah, sure. Let me jump in. It's a lot to unpack as far as multifamily. For the first time in history, downtown luxury apartments and the micro units that just built, like Wolf Point Towers and some of the other things downtown, those are seeing about a 13% vacancy. That's the lowest vacancy downtown Chicago we had on record. We're seeing actually the South Cook County, south side of Chicago, sea-level apartments in the southern suburbs outperform downtown and outperform the north side. Same thing in office, right? A lot of the migration has been to the single-story office buildings where the building, the business owner can kind of control the narrative, so to speak, versus our building. Every week it seems like we're getting a notice from management that there's somebody else in the building that had COVID. And then people are reimagining that space. What do we do? Do we do one person every other cubicle? Do we just make the cubicles bigger? Do we turn cubicles into offices? What do we do here to deal with this situation that we're in? As far as Chicago is concerned, there's always been a romance with the media and violence, right? And I've had some owners call me during the middle of the looting and I had to talk them off the ledge to say, hey, there's looting going on in Chicago, Santa Barbara, Santa Monica, and some of these other places as well. And some of these other places got hit 10 times harder because the looters were actually organized, right? They were like doing stuff to kind of keep the police over here while they were hitting places over there. So we want to keep that in mind and don't go too far into it, because we're seeing the local news a lot and not seeing that this is a broader concern that impacted the nation. So we are seeing the migration towards the suburbs, right? As far as office, industrial, we're seeing that pick up. We're seeing people buying single family homes in the suburbs. We're seeing apartment demand. They're hunkering down, so to speak. The South Side has bigger units. These bigger units are less expensive, and you could you could grab a 3-bedroom and kind of get a couple generations in there or a couple friends in there and kind of pack it in and prepare for the storm. Now, there are some people that are having some legitimate COVID-related rent issues, right? And then you got some other people that are electing not to pay because they think they got a free get out of jail free card, right? But I think for the most part, people are doing the right thing. I'm talking to owners. There's a couple people that are missing in action, but for the most part, they're able to put together payment plans and get this stuff going. But I think at the end of the day, the tenants need more, and so that they can kind of feed the beast, because it costs more to operate an office building now in Chicago, an apartment building, or any kind of building where people are concerned, because you got, especially apartments, you're at home longer. Right? So your expenses are going up. You're throwing away more trash. That 10 hours you were at school and work, now at home, you're using more water. So the resources are being used more, and then the managers cleaning the common areas more. But those downtown apartments where you just sleep in your apartment, right? And you got 3 floors of amenities. The city of downtown is your backyard, right? Those micro units aren't attractive anymore because the 3 floors of amenities aren't open. And for the most part, downtown isn't open. The silver lining is the backdrop of Chicago, right? I'm seeing downtown. I went downtown the other day with my family, and it was not a lot of activity downtown on Michigan Avenue and Wacker Drive and some of the other places. I came back and went to Hyde Park and Beverly, and it was booming. Right, so I'm seeing the local economies pick up more. Hopefully, there'll be more diversity in some of the ownership of some of these businesses that decided not to come back. Maybe some of the locals or some of the people from the neighborhood will buy them. But I'd definitely rather go to a local, call it Hyde Park produce, than to go to a big box Jewel if I just need a few items or something like that right now. Just because I'd rather be around people that the smaller groups. So I think we're seeing that resurgence. 2 out of 10 hotel rooms are empty, are full. But some people in Chicago are looking at that as a staycation. Hey, I can go to the Langdon for $200, or, whatever. I'll take my family and go there. Chicago's resilient. We'll get through this, and our pipeline of fresh talent is so strong that businesses can't resist. That's why we got so many Fortune 500 companies either headquartered here or having their second headquarters in Chicago because of our talent available pipeline. Look at the realtors and the real estate practitioners, but also the people coming out of DePaul and Northwestern and University of Chicago and all these other places.
So what I'm hearing is now's a great time to invest in co-working and transit-oriented development, right? I kid. So, yeah. Sarah, I'd love to hear a little bit of your perspective. What are some of the things that you're seeing? Because again, you work with a lot of institutional clients, and I know that you're in the middle of all of this.
And so I'm somewhat like a Sharon on the call, some residential and commercial. So on the commercial side, though, I only work with government agencies as I'm minority certified business. And so where they say business is down, go to government, and I am busier than ever. 2 contracts I just signed, I can't really go into detail, but one is a government agency. They just awarded, I'm working with Cushman on it, but they have 23,000 square feet of office space. And so their lease comes up in 2023. They're looking to scale down to about 15, but they're not, kind of like what Tanya was saying earlier, Chicago's resilient. They're not looking to say, oh, COVID, they're not in a scare. They know that they need office space. They may be a little less or maybe a little different than what they're used to, but they're a public agency. They serve the public. And they are making sure that their needs are met in the 2022-23 space. CTA, I'm on contract with them. They're expanding on some other things on the red line. That is moving forward full steam ahead. So I think the thought of COVID is in the back of people's mind from a business perspective. They don't want to say, okay, COVID's here, stop everything, and then we'll start up. They're moving forward as before. As far as I'm in South Shore, prices are crazy and multiple offers. I mean, I'm like on the 7,700 side of it, and houses are going for upwards of 400,000. So that used to be, it's closer to the Highlands. The Highlands, you know, my a family member, they just sold their house for 750 in the Highlands, and they did need some work. So prices are south are going up, and people are migrating to the suburbs because they are working from home. And then they say, if you do go back to work, if it's 3 days a week, I'm okay with the commute, as opposed to 5 days a week. Younger couples are looking at the suburbs as an option as well. And like you said, for Hyde Park, that's like the party space. Now you go down on Friday, Saturday night, the silver, everything is just booming. You know, I try to stay away. I'm social distance from people, but I mean, we see COVID is here, but I think people are hopeful. I think people are just getting cabin fever, and we know the winter is coming. But next year, I think people are just planning ahead, buckling down. People are taking a more, I talk to a lot of smaller businesses, and what we are looking at is maybe keeping our cash just a little bit more. We may want to hire someone that may not be for a full-time person. People are hiring part-time. They're working other things out from a contract state basis on 6-month, 3-month deals, but they are still looking to expand their businesses. And so I'm like Chris, I'm born and raised in Chicago, love Chicago. So I want to see it do well. And I think we're just all waiting for when we can get out more, because I think we'll come out and support the communities. And like you said, looting is happening all over. So we just want to rebuild from that and kind of create a better narrative. And I think from a real estate perspective, I think that's our job, because the media will report what they see from a negative perspective. Not sometimes, you know, it is a positive, but for the most part, I think it's our job to kind of see the positive, and you have the data, tell the story. I'm a big data person, so you can say all these things. When you look at the data, like actually, there are 90% plus tenants paying their rent. So, you know, the way the news reports, no one is paying rent. People are trying to scam. I'm a landlord. You know, my tenants, they are paying. So I don't think it's all gloom and doom. The other thing is, from a multifamily, the 2 to 4 unit market, the smaller multifamily buildings, everyone is looking for something like that right now. You can find that they want to rehab, they're looking to maybe put their family members in there. If something like this happens, an emergency, they can all live in one space, pool their money together. But that's kind of what I'm seeing on that front. So I am resilient that Chicago will make a great comeback. I don't have a ski lodge background like Tony or anybody coming up to talk to me.
You know, I hear a lot from my residential members that their clientele are looking for things that maybe weren't quite as top of mind before, right? As you all are indicating, people want more space. They're more interested in yards. They want more sustainable features because they're seeing those hits they're taking on utilities, and they see what they could do with insulation or solar or whatever, you know. And so suddenly some of the things that might have been more kind of the icing on the cake are actually becoming the cake. And so it's interesting to kind of see that pivot. Chris, I want to come back to you for a minute here, because we've heard several mentions of retail corridors, and I can say for myself, I had a similar experience to Tony and Sarah. You know, I had to go downtown a couple of weeks ago, and driving home, I popped right up onto the interstate, no backup there going up Illinois or whatever, nothing at all. And then I got down to Logan Square and hit a traffic jam, you know. So it's it does seem like the retail corridors in the neighborhoods are really popping a bit right now. And I'm kind of curious to know, since that's a lot of what you do, what you're seeing in those retail corridors.
Some are, some aren't. I mean, you know, we, I think, especially Wicker Park, Bucktown has been hit pretty hard. But Wicker Park, Bucktown was going through a hard time when the West Loop started to evolve. So I think there's somewhat of a shift. If you say Logan Square, you know, that's also been a shift where, you know, the rents were lower for residential. And so in turn, more people and the retail followed. Hyde Park's another good example of an area that has grown. You know, you have just a lot of, especially on 53rd, and you've got some stuff happening in those general areas. But Overall, I still think that, you have a lot of retailers that are deciding whether they're going to be in the storefront business anymore. And then you have people that are looking at that were online only e-commerce that are seeing an opportunity to get in at a rent price that works for their business model. So the verdict is still out. So.
We're still very TBD, as you say, right? So we will see. Tanya, I feel like this will be a good time to pivot over to you based on what Chris was just saying. I'd love to hear a little bit about the movers you're seeing at the moment.
Yeah, so the city's latest numbers suggest that about 25% of the city's small businesses have not reopened since COVID hit. So I think that gives you some understanding of that the hot areas aren't everywhere, right? And so they're very concerned about that number. That's not only businesses that aren't there, but that's people that are not working, right? And so I think that, like I said, there's still a lot of stress in the market that maybe we don't see. So for example, think about the fitness industry right now, health clubs in particular, and gyms, right? They're really struggling right now. And a lot of those are small businesses. They may be franchised, right? But still small business owners. And the rate of return of people coming back to work out has not been great, whether you're a large gym or a small one. And so there's a lot of stress in that market that I think a lot of people just don't realize. And if they can't get capacity restrictions opened up a little bit more, so that they can get people in a different way that services their membership better, I think we'll see some changes in there that won't be great, right? So I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity, but a lot will happen on a lot will depend on what happens with these reopening guidelines, whether we have to constrict a little bit more, where is that constriction, whether we'll be able to open up a little bit more. We're constantly having those conversations with the mayor's office in particular, because without a little bit of movement, I think we'll see further restriction of businesses that just can't make it as the weather turns. So I think we're at a kind of a critical place right now for the restaurant industry, certainly for bars, entertainment, that whole space. We'll see how the movie theaters do. I'm not sure yet. And health clubs in particular. Like I said, those industries alone employ a lot of folks. And they, like especially in the fitness industry, I think the average that they brought back is maybe 50% of their employees. And they don't know what they're going to do with the other 50, right? So we have to keep in mind that government has a very critical role in the further opening of the economy and the further stabilization of the economy. So what Governor Pritzker does, what Mayor Lightfoot does in order to open or constrict further, we'll see how that plays out in the next few months.
I've been reading a lot of articles recently about how if we do go into further quarantines, they may look different based on access to testing and other information that wasn't here back in March, right? So we might see a more focused type of quarantine, based on what we're actually seeing with testing, and that might hopefully allow us to kind of have the best of both worlds, right? Where those businesses that really took it on the teeth before, maybe will have a little bit more leeway to operate while also being able to control the virus. But it's really anyone's guess whether that's possible. And because it's so politically hot right now as a topic in general, I don't really envy either the governor or the mayor in that process, because no matter what they do, they're going to have half the people really salty, and so it's not a good spot to be in,
It's
and
not.
I don't envy it.
It's not. And, you certainly don't want to pit the health of people against, the vitality of small business, right? The health of whether or not small business is going to make it, or a large business for that matter. there's a way, they don't have to be mutually exclusive. There's a way that you can attend to both in a substantive manner. So those are the conversations that we're having with the governor's office and with Mayor Lightfoot's office to say, there are ways to open up that aren't just open up capacity to 100%, right? There are ways that you can open up that are significant to the business and that won't further impact negatively public health. And finding the right balance as we move along is really going to be key.
Absolutely, agree completely. We've had a wonderful question come from the audience that I would just open up to the group. Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to tackle it. But the question is the idea of attracting national chains to invest. And, you know, we've heard a little bit of mention of Invest Southwest, and we've also heard Tony say that he's seeing a ton of movement, and Sarah as well, in some communities that don't traditionally profile as hot investment communities. The question is kind of, if we look at the city's Southwest initiative, do you think that that could sort of help attract national chains to invest in the south and west sides? Maybe we could start with Chris if nobody has a hand they want to raise.
Sorry, I was on mute. You know, the verdict is still out. I think that what you may see is chains that are already in the market that dip their foot in the water and then they follow each other. They need good co-tenancy. So you may see a grocer, especially as Tanya was mentioning, go into some of these markets, and that's an impetus for other chains to go in and around them. So I think that's essential service type uses. I think some medical uses you may see, but ultimately I think Walmart would probably be a good example. You know, at 47th and Cottage, it's one of their best stores. I know when we were there and it was closed, I couldn't believe the amount of people that pulled up and said they can't wait till it opens again. So, you know, that being said, you know, new people coming into the market, they tend to go to very developed areas, primarily where they can register what the sales per square foot are and determine where they believe that they're going to have success. So, you know, ultimately in this market, I think grocery anchored centers, the Targets, the Walmarts, Amazon grocery, for example, you know, they're going to be the first people helping and develop some of those markets.
Sarah, do you want to jump in a little bit with your experience with governmental entities? I mean, and you know a little bit of the pulse of the city. What kind of things do you think the Invest Southwest initiatives could lead to? Do you think it is possible to attract any kind of chains or investment using or leveraging that program?
Well, I think the jury is still out on the whole Invest Southwest initiative. So it's new. They have a lot of great ideas. I know the land bank is looking to partner with them on some things as well from the commercial side. But I'm hopeful that it will spark change. But the question is, will I be around to see it? I don't know if that's something that, you know, it goes on for the next 10 years, 10, 20 years, and we're all retired somewhere in Florida, you know, but I know a lot needs to happen on both the south and west side, and I know the city can't do it alone. So it depends on the partnerships that they create and the buy-in they get from other retailers, investors, developers, and things like that. It's going to take a concerted effort from everybody at the same time. Usually you'll see something, they'll have an initiative, and then you'll have a couple of things done, and then you have something else come 2 years later, and it's all sparsed out. So I think they have to have a concerted effort by everyone at the same time to kind of push things forward, especially on some of these areas in the south and the west side that are very, that were hardest hit. Not even, it was pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, they were struggling. So, I mean, to add COVID to another layer, then you have an unemployment that you see the numbers, they're high. They're coming back, but when you add that on to economic hardship that are already, in areas that are already hit hard, what does that really mean? So I'm hopeful, you know, I know they hired a ton of people to kind of oversee all these different things that have planning degrees, some people from Chicago, some people not. So I'm just looking to see kind of what that actually means into real dollars, real employment, real initiatives for the actual city of Chicago on the south and west side. So like I said, I'm just still watching and depending on, I think, how the numbers fall. And then we're coming into the winter months, depending what type of winter we have from the restaurant side. I know they have this initiative. I'm trying to figure out how can we eat outside for their $5,000. So I don't know. So there's a bunch of things that have to come into play at the same time.
So we're running a little bit short on time, but I'd love to hear a quick round of final thoughts. And because a lot of the folks that attend these events are indeed agents and folks who are looking to maybe be you all in a few years, I'm kind of curious to know if you all had any advice that you would give for folks who would like to work with, national clients, institutional investors, et cetera. What's something an agent could do to kind of kickstart a career, or where's somewhere they should look for help?
Let me go first, Jacob. And also, when you do this round, also try to say something positive or strength of the city. I think there's a lot of focus on the weaknesses of Chicago. But I see the institutional players hitting the pause button, like Sharon and Tanya alluded to earlier. But for the private client backed by the family office, a lot of them are looking at it as an opportunity to get into a space and get something where they were getting priced out by the big billionaires and the big institutional companies earlier. So it's still movement. It's taking a little bit longer to get the deals over the finish line, and we are getting there. And then my positive for Chicago is the strength of the diversity of our 77 neighborhoods. There's different culture, there's something for everyone, there's different pricing and everything.
Sarah?
And I'm like Tony, I'd say something positive. So I guess the fact that we're still here means we're still here. So that's a good thing, a great thing. Membership of the Realtor, Chicago Association of Realtors, we're over 16,000. So, I mean, we have a great number of people joining every month. And for me, residential, and then for the government space, commercial. So I find that what commercial brokers want is data. Actually, what most people want, they want data. They don't, yes, houses so, but they want to see the data, the trends, like NAR puts out all these statistics, or just the unemployment for all the states to a couple of clients. So if you have data, know the data, and if you know a certain market, like I'm Southside, I know people try to be all things to everyone. I am a Southsider, born and raised. I know like the back of my hand. And so someone who's coming into that market, 47th and, Cottage Grove at Walmart, that's where I take and get my prescription. So I know the community, the players. And so people try to wish to be in different communities, and that's fine. But for me, I work where I live. So from that perspective, especially with 16,000 agents that are on the residential side, you need to kind of set yourself apart. And I'm on a commercial side from a government standpoint. So I work with those, the political officials and public policy, know your policies. And that's another thing that people are interested in.
Well, with the idea of policy, maybe we could pivot over to Tanya at this point. What's some advice that you might give for folks who'd like to get involved in policy that affects these kinds of players?
Absolutely. Look, know your aldermen, know the aldermen of the areas that you're interested in developing, get them to understand what it's going to take to develop an area, be real with them about who you might be able to attract and why that's going to make this neighborhood better, be an asset to this neighborhood, tell the story of the neighborhood. And the alderman should be able to help with that. You have to build, sometimes you have to introduce, especially when you're talking about large clients, right? You got to introduce these neighborhoods to some of these folks and then have the data, as Sarah said, to back it up, right? This isn't just a good story. I got some data that says that people are going to shop here and that you're going to make money here. At the end of the day, they're not charities. They want to make some money, right? And so I think that, and the policymakers have a lot to do with that, right? Because they can make it seem like Chicago's a difficult place to do business, right? But we know Chicago is a place where businesses can make money, right? And so I think that you figure out what the story is, you tell it, you get the elected officials on your side, make them your partners. They're going to be your partners anyway. So make them your partners on the good side. And I have a lot of hope in Invest Southwest. I think it's a very creative idea. It's been tepid so far, but I still think that there's room to grow. So I would say that figure out what the story is, tell it, and make those elected officials your partners.
Sharon, do you want to jump in with some words of wisdom?
Well, first of all, I agree with Tony that I think the big strength of Chicago is the diversity of the neighborhoods. And I'm very optimistic that in spite of some of the issues that COVID is creating, that it will at the same time create a lot of great opportunities for someone coming into the market now. I think that one way perhaps to come into the market now, even though it might be a little tough, or people might consider it might be tough, a tough time would be to maybe get on a team where you can have extra mentoring that you might not automatically have on both the commercial and residential side. One quick question, if I could divert just a minute, I wanted to get maybe the rest of the panel's thoughts on shared workspace. If you remember many years ago, there was WeWork that came out and that did not succeed very well, but this was quite a few years ago. Whereas now I'd like your thoughts on if that concept were recreated under a sort of a master lease type of plan, if you thought it would be successful now, considering what's going on with so many people working from home or maybe wanting smaller office spaces, if that concept could work now where it did not work too well, maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Maybe we could have Chris tackle this one. In the interest of time, I'd love to hear from everyone, but we're also running a tiny bit long. So Chris, do you want to kind of jump in here? That's a great question.
Yeah, not really my space. I'm a retail guy, but you know, I was working with WeWork on a property in January, February, and the financial strength of that company wasn't good then. So, you know, COVID has really kind of changed it. You see what's happening with Regis and stuff like that. I think there is a need for people to get out of their house. Right now, I got kids trying to question me, my dog's barking, you know, et cetera. So there may be some semblance of that moving forward. In reference to what Tony had mentioned, you know, I think ultimately Chicago has density and measurable demographics. So retailers that are targeting a certain demographic or a certain density or age group are always going to come to this market. And, you know, there's a reason that there has been growth in that. And so a lot of movement in and out. The 4 or 5 things I have under contract right now are being sold by people who don't live here and are under contract by people who do live here. So that says a lot.
Well, I think I can say too, just from being a news hound, that, you know, the shift to workplace as a service and away from just proper co-working where you pay someone and you go in and do everything yourself. I mean, Sharon, that might be a way that this business model could continue to thrive, in that the expert that's providing the service also provides all the COVID protections that you need and the layout design needs that you might have to be able to structure an office, like Tony said, that doesn't suddenly have everyone in the building getting sick constantly and playing a Plinko game about when the virus is coming to you. You know, so hopefully we'll see. I don't know, but it's an interesting thing because, as you mentioned, WeWork was really hot for a while, and the idea of co-working was everything for a while. And this is a real unexpected shift in the market that no one could really have prognosticated. I've sat through a lot of sessions where the crystal balls got popped out and nobody said pandemic. So, you know, it's not, what do you do, right? Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This has been a lovely discussion. Props to our panelists and to the audience for coming. Also, a big shout out to Inland. Thanks again for being a sponsor for Commercial Forum events. We couldn't do it without y'all. And so, you know, for the folks that did attend today, look to Inland Private Capital Corporation for lending needs, help with 1031s, et cetera. And thanks everyone for coming. Have a great weekend.